guys, today we're gonna be reading In the Year of the Boar and Jackie Robinson by Bette Lord, the author of Spring Moon. We're gonna be reading the chapters March and April. March, China's little ambassador. 9 o'clock sharp, the very next morning, Shirley sat in the principal's office at PS8. Her mother and the schoolmistress were talking. Shirley didn't understand a word. It was embarrassing. Why hadn't she, too, studied the English course on the records that father had sent? But it was too late now. She stopped trying to understand. Suddenly, Mother hissed in Chinese, "Stop that or else!" Shirley snapped her head down. She had been staring at the stranger, but she could not keep her eyes from rolling up again. There was something more foreign about the principal than about any other foreigner she had seen so far. What was it? It was not the blue eyes. Many others had them too. It was not the high nose. All foreign noses were higher than Chinese ones. It was not the blue hair. Hair came in all colors in America. Yes, of course, naturally. The woman had no eyelashes. Other foreigners grew hair all over them, more than 6 Chinese together. This woman had none. Her skin was as bare as the happy Buddha's belly, except for the neat rows of stiff curls that hugged her head. She had no eyebrows even. They were penciled on and looked just like the character for man. This one. And every time she tilted her head, her hair moved all in one piece like a hat. Shirley, Mother was trying to get her attention. Tell the principal how old you are. Shirley put up 10 fingers. While the principal filled out a form, Mother argued excitedly. But why? Shirley had given the correct answer. She counted just to make sure. On the day she was born, she was 1 year old. And 2 months later, upon the new year, she was 2. That was the year of the rabbit. Then came dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and now it was the year of the boar, making 10. Proof she was 10. Mother shook her head. Apparently she had lost the argument. Oh. She announced in Chinese, "Shirley, you will enter 5th grade." 5th? But, Mother, I don't speak English, and besides, I only completed 3 grades in Chongqing. I know, but the principal has explained that in America, everyone is assigned according to age. 10 years old means 5th grade, and we must observe the American rules, mustn't we? Shirley nodded obediently, but she could not help thinking that only Shirley had to go to school, and only Shirley would be in trouble if she failed. Mother stood up to leave. She took Shirley by the hand. "Remember, my daughter, you may be the only Chinese that these Americans will ever meet. Do your best. Be extra good. Upon your shoulders rests the reputation of all Chinese." All 500 million? Shirley wondered. "You are China's little ambassador." "Yes, Mother." Shirley squared her shoulders and tried to feel worthy of this great honor. At the same time, she wished she could leave with Mother. Alone, the schoolmistress and Shirley looked at each other. Suddenly, the principal shut one eye, the right one, then opened it again. So she shut and opened both eyes. Oh. Was this another foreign custom, like shaking hands? It must be proper if a principal does it, Shirley thought. She ought to return the gesture, but she didn't know how. So she shut and opened both eyes, twice. This brought a warm laugh. The principal then led her to class. The room was large, with windows up to the ceiling. Row after row of students, each one unlike the next. Some faces were white, like clean plates, others black like ebony. Some were in between shades. A few were spotted all over. One boy was as big around as a water jar. Several others were as thin as chopsticks. No one wore a uniform of blue like hers. There were sweaters with animals on them, shirts with stripes, and shirts with squares, dresses in colors as varied as grand-uncle's paints. 3 girls even wore earrings. While Shirley looked about, the principal had been making a speech. Suddenly, it ended with Shirley Temple Wong. The class stood up and waved. Amitabha! They were all so tall! Even Waterjar was a head taller than she. For a fleeting moment she wondered if Mother would consider buying an ambassador a pair of high-heeled shoes. "Hi, Shirley!" the class shouted. Shirley bowed deeply. Then, taking a guess, she replied, "Hi!" The teacher introduced herself and showed the new pupil to a front row seat. Shirley liked her right away, although she had a most difficult name, Mrs. Rappaport. She was a tiny woman with dainty bones and fiery red hair brushed skyward. Shirley had thought that in her previous life she must have been a bird, a cardinal, perhaps. Yet she commanded respect, for no student talked out of turn. Or was it the long, mean pole that hung on the wall behind the desk that commanded respect? It dwarfed the bamboo cane the teacher in Chungking had used to punish forehands whenever he stole a trifle from another. Throughout the lessons, Shirley leaned forward, barely touching her seat, to catch the meaning, but the words sounded like a gurgling water. Now and then, when Mrs. Rappaport looked her way, she opened and shut her eyes as the principal had done, to show friendship. At lunchtime, Shirley went with the class to the school cafeteria, but before she could pick up a tray, several boys and girls waved for her to follow them. They were smiling, so she went along. They snuck back to the classroom to pick up coats, then hurried out the door and across the schoolyard to a nearby store. Shirley was certain they should not be there, but what choice did she have? These were now her friends. One by one, they gave their lunch money to the store owner, whom they called Mr. P. In return, he gave each a bottle of orange-colored water, bread twice the size of an ear of corn oozing with meatball, peppers, onions, and hot red gravy, and a large piece of brown paper to lay on the icy sidewalk and sit upon. While they ate, everyone except Shirley played marbles or cards and traded bottle caps and pictures of men swinging a stick or wearing one huge glove. It was the best lunch Shirley had ever had. And there was more. After lunch, each of them was allowed to select one item from those displayed under the glass counter. There were paper strips dotted with red and yellow sugar tacks, chocolate soldiers in blue tin foil, boxes of raisins and nuts, envelopes of chips, cookies as big as pancakes, candy elephants, lollipops in every color, a wax collection of red lips, white teeth, pink ears, and curly black mustaches. Shirley was the last to make up her mind. She chose a hand filled with juice. It looked better than it tasted, but she did not mind. Tomorrow she could choose again. But when she was back in her seat, waiting for Mrs. Rappaport to enter the classroom, Shirley's knees shook. What if the teacher found out about her escapade? There would go her ambassadorship. She would be shamed. Her parents would lose face. All 500 million Chinese would suffer. Round and round in her stomach, the meatballs tumbled like pebbles. Then Mrs. Rappaport came in. She did not look pleased. Shirley flinched when the teacher went straight to the long, mean pole. For the first time, her heart went out to forehands. She shut her eyes and prayed to the goddess of mercy. "Oh, Kuan Yin, please don't let me cry." She waited, listening for Mrs. Rappaport's footsteps to become louder and louder. They did not. Finally, curiosity overcame fear, and she looked up. Mrs. Rappaport was using the pole to open a window. The lessons continued. During arithmetic, Shirley raised her hand. She went to the blackboard and wrote the correct answer. Mrs. Rappaport rewarded her with a big smile. Shirley opened and shut her eyes to show her pleasure. Soon she was dreaming about candy elephants and cookies the size of pancakes. Then school was over. As Shirley was putting on her coat, Mrs. Rappaport handed her a letter, obviously to be given to her parents. Fear returned, round and round, this time like rocks. She barely greeted her mother at the door. What happened? Nothing? You look sick. I'm all right. Perhaps it was something you ate at lunch? No, she said much too quickly. Nothing at all to do with lunch. Oh, what then? The job of an ambassador is harder than I thought. At bedtime, Shirley could no longer put off giving up the letter. Trembling, she handed it to Father. She imagined herself on a boat back to China. She read it aloud to Mother. Then they both turned to her, a most quizzical look on their faces. Your teacher suggests we take you to a doctor. She thinks there is something wrong with your eyes. April. A hungry ghost. Day by day, week by week, little by, Shirley shrank until she was no more. It was the only explanation. Why else did the class, which had welcomed her so warmly at first, ignore her now? True, she could only speak a few words at a time, and most often no one could even guess at the meaning of those. True, she was a coward. Those who broke the rules to go to Mr. P's no longer bothered with her. True, she was stupid? Too stupid to know the difference between a wink and a tick until Father explained. Excuse me, I don't know what the difference between a wink and a tick is. Oh, what is it? Hello? Eh? Eh? But still, didn't they know how lonely she felt? It was spring now, but Shirley, hunched in her coat, walked as if there was still snow on the ground. Carefully, she sidestepped the boys who played basketball, the girls who roller skated, the groups who seemed to laugh or whisper whenever she passed. Bullies! She dreaded the distance across the schoolyard. It was endless and full of traps. If a loose ball rolled by, should she catch it? If a girl fell, should she help her up? If someone glanced her way, should she wave? This afternoon, as every afternoon, she pretended to have somewhere to go, and hurried on. But she had nowhere to go but home. At Mr. P's, she slowed down. The pennies in her pocket jingled to be spent, but the usual crowd was pressed nose to nose at the counter, and she hurried on. With no one to talk to, she mumbled to herself, Buffalo, stink, stank, stuck, liberty, slave, Mississippi liver. She tried to string these new words with the old ones in sentences, but she had no more sense than a blind man threading beads. Ahead was a gang playing stoop ball, blocking her way. She waited for a quiet moment, one she could pass. This game was different from the others. This one she knew how to play. It was just like Trap the Birdie, except instead of throwing up feathers stuck inside the hole of a coin, the player bounced a ball against the step and called a mystery number. The one assigned that number had to catch the ball to win a point for his team. Suddenly, a ball flew overhead, and the crowd was running towards her. She ducked inside the delicatessen next door for safety. It smelled strangely, as if packed with dirty, damp socks, which upon closer inspection she recognized as cheese and fish. Not the silvery catches that swam and somersaulted in the wooden basins that lined the market at the foot of the mountain of 10,000 steps. Dead fish! So long dead that the cook would probably not even throw them out to the cats. Slivers of gray fish pickled in light glue, smoked fish with yellow eyes that bulged, raw red fish without heads or tails. I like fishtails. Fishtails are yummy. The owner spoke up. Pointing to a pack of juicy fruit gum, Shirley handed him the pennies. She waited by the door for the ball to fly in the opposite direction. When the coast was clear, she wanted to run across the sidewalk. Just then, a voice asked, "Want to play?" It belonged to Joseph, who sat behind her in class. His hair was always slicked down and scientifically parted in the middle. His belly protruded just enough for his hands to rest comfortably upon it. His face was pure white, as if his mother had powdered her baby on the wrong end. But surely, at this moment, he was the handsomest boy in all of Brooklyn. "Please," she said, "please." The other players groaned, but did nothing to stop Joseph from whispering in her ear, "You are number 8 on my team." She nodded eagerly, then bowed to all the players. They groaned again. The next number called was hers. She ran after the ball, bumping teammates along the way, only to let it slip through her fingers. It didn't matter. She was on a team. Her happiness did not last. No sooner had she learned to smack the ball smartly on the steps, angling it right or left, than the other players revolted. Nobody wanted the Chinese on his team, for whenever she yelled out a mystery number, it was no mystery at all. It was always 1 or true or tree. No surprise, always 1 or true or tree. In the excitement of hurling the ball, she couldn't remember how to say the higher numbers, especially after she had missed every ball when the other team called 8. Pretty soon they were calling 8 almost every time. Her team was losing. It was all her fault. Finally, Joseph approached her with an outstretched hand. She shrugged, gave up the ball, and stood apart again to watch. She laughed along when someone missed. She cheered along when someone scored. Always a second too late, a second too long. Yet none of the gang noticed. They seemed not to see her at all. She ought to go home, she thought. Mother had learned how to make delicious cupcakes. But she did not move. She stood by instead like a hungry ghost. Finally, one player left. Shirley followed a few steps behind her, pretending to kick a castaway can whenever the American turned to glance her way. At home, she locked herself in the bathroom. Tiptoe on the toilet seat, she peered into the mirror, trying to blow bubbles with her juicy fruit gum. Even the first graders blew bubbles as big as a full moon. Hers were no bigger than a button. Jaws aching, she tried again and again. She had to do something, right? Had to! "Our daughter's not herself," she heard her mother say to Father when she thought Shirley was asleep. "Oh, she'll be fine again soon," Father said. "Even the finest engine has a few knocks at first." "But I'm not an engine," she thought. "Engines don't cry. Engines don't need friends to talk to play with, to share." Reaching out, she tried to pretend a fourth cousin was there. The next day, everyone was assigned a poem to recite. Shirley was not. She decided to learn one anyways. Over and over, she played the new record Father had bought for her, imitating each sound until she was certain she could imitate a stanza. Then, locking herself in the bathroom, she practiced before the mirror. She gestured to the right, she gestured to the left. Not exactly certain the meaning of the words, she dared not elaborate more. Her father, who spoke English well and tutored her, could have explained them all, but Shirley wanted her efforts to be a complete surprise. "Wait until they hear," she told herself. "Just wait." In class, she was disappointed when Mrs. Rappaport did not call for volunteers, but asked each student to recite in turn by seats. Down the first row, up the second. At last it was Joseph's turn, and she was next. Sliding to the edge of her seat, she waited, so sure of her success that she was not even nervous. Joseph's poem seemed very long. Would it never end so she could shine? Before she had even sat down, she popped up. Everyone murmured, wondering at the Chinese ambassador. Shirley waited for complete silence. Then, clearing her throat, she began. At once they were giggling, even Mrs. Rappaport. There was nothing to do but gesture to the right and gesture to the left, exactly as she had practiced, only faster and faster until finally the stanza was done. Now everyone was laughing openly. Shirley pretended to share their merriment, but tears welled in her throat, and she could only manage a weak smile. What had gone wrong? Had she done something stupid again? She wanted to run, but her feet would not obey. The laughter continued. Soon she stood like a forlorn scarecrow under the pelting rain. Mrs. Rappaport was the first to notice that Shirley was no longer smiling, and immediately clapped for order. When at last the room was still, she spoke. "Thank you for a most remarkable performance. It must have taken hours and hours to mimic each syllable just right. At first I thought my ears were deceiving me. How is it possible? Right here in our classroom, the fabulous Donald Duck, Chip 'n' Dale, and Mickey Mouse." Despite these efforts to soothe her feelings, Shirley felt humiliated. From then on, she hardly spoke, not even in Chinese, to her mother. For whenever she complained, Mother would say, "Always be worthy, my daughter, of your good fortune. Born to an illustrious clan from the ancient civilization of China, you now live in the land of plenty and opportunity. By your conduct, show that you deserve to enjoy the best of both worlds." This hoary tidbit found its way to the dinner table, almost as frequently as the odious glass of milk. One night, Mother announced a plan to cheer Shirley up. When she was Shirley's age, she had pleaded with her father for permission to take piano lessons. "What?" boomed the old-fashioned scholar, who barely approved of teaching females to read and write. "What? My daughter? A sing-song girl? Never!" Now she assumed that her own daughter would be overjoyed to do something she herself had never been permitted to do. She had arranged for Shirley to have piano lessons. Tomorrow after school she would go downstairs to the basement where Senora Rodriguez, the landlady, doubled as a music teacher. The next day, after a gentle knock, knock, Shirley waited nervously. She had never met the Senora before, but had often seen a sinister shadow rocking back and forth behind billowing lace curtains, back and forth into the night. The door opened. There stood the Senora, short and stout, wrapped in layer upon layer of black wooden shawls. Her skin was like crinkled tissue paper, her eyes sunken and dark as her eyes sunken and dark as well water. She smiled ever so fleetingly, as if pained by the exercise. "Hello, how you do? I'm Shirley, and my mother." She eked out the words as if squeezing dregs from a squashed tube of stale toothpaste. The response was less than reassuring, just a twitch of a stubby finger to follow. She obeyed, her gaze fixed on the golden wedges that slapped the bottom of the woman's bulging feet, as she led the way through a curtain of colored beads to the piano. It, too, was covered with shawls. With a pat on the wooden bench, she invited Shirley to sit beside her. It was not going to be easy. The Senora occupied all but the tiniest sliver of the seat. Only by locking her foot around a leg of the bench did Shirley manage to stay perched. Carefully, she twisted to face her teacher. Without a word, the Senora grimaced, and out came a set of upper and lower teeth, which she then sat on the music stand. Stuck between the molars, something green. String beans or broccoli? Shirley tried not to look, but the teeth were exactly at eye level. Grinning like a newborn, the Senora now took Shirley's hands in hers. They felt surprisingly soft and warm, like a pair of mittens. When she finally spoke, her low, accented voice resembled the moaning of grandmother's favorite fortune-teller, frightening and fascinating all at once. "I will teach these hands to make music. Music, the language of angels. Angels who give happiness to all living things. Things like little girls. See?" "I see. Bueno, we begin." Placing Shirley's thumb on a key, the Senora pressed it down to summon a note. "Do." This is do. Pushing her index finger, she said, re. This is re. And so it went until Shirley learned to name the white keys. At least 100 years seemed to have passed before Shirley could bend and unbend her stubborn fingers well enough to hit each of the 8 notes of the scale without disturbing its neighbor. By then, her head ached, her fingers ached, her foot ached. That was not the language of angels, but the curse of demons! Did Mother not realize what she had been spared? Just when Shirley thought the ordeal was ended, Senora Rodriguez left the room and returned with a green bird in a cage. A little surprise! The Senora set the bird on top of the piano. At once it began to squawk. Play the right note for Toscanini, the Senora suggested hurriedly. Looking about, Shirley wondered who was to play, and who was Toscanini. The bird was flapping its wings now. Pointing to the correct key, the Senora said, "Play, little girl, before the birdie makes us loco." Shirley did. There was a glorious silence, but not for long. Frantically, Shirley searched for Fa and then played it. Relief. Then me. And so it went, until at last a single squawk produced the desired response. Toscanini was not impressed. On and on he squawked while she poked at the keys, on and on until her fingers acquired a will of their own, on and on until the notes blended into a melody so compelling that Shirley and the Senora began to sway from side to side and sing along. So enchanted were they by their duet that the miracle at first went unnoticed. Amitabha! Toscanini was speechless. Content now to perch silently on his swing, the bird kept an eye on the proceedings with an occasional 360-degree flip of the head. With the last note still in the air, Senora Rodriguez popped her teeth back inside her mouth. The lesson was over. But the next week, Shirley's fingers seemed as clumsy as ever, and now there were lessons on the piano in addition to lessons at school. Hour after hour, day after day, week after week, study, more study, and yet again study. None of this would have truly happened if she had someone to walk down the long corridors at PS8 with, someone to complain to about being the only Chinese in the school and the only one who had to take piano lessons, someone who cared if there was a Shirley Temple Wong in this world, but that someone did not exist. On the last day of school before spring vacation, she spotted a new student entering another classroom, an older Chinese girl with pigtails just like herself. Shirley hurried to greet her, but just when she was within shouting distance, the bell rang and the door closed. All that morning, she sat at her desk, unable to concentrate on what Mrs. Rappaport was teaching. She eyed the clock. Soon it would be lunchtime, she thought. Soon they would meet in the cafeteria. For once, she could speak fluently, not like an idiot. This time others, not Shirley, would feel left out. She smiled, imagining the fun of talking about things the others, not Shirley, knew little about. Things like the New Year's parade with the dragon that flew on tall poles, the lion that pounced to the beat of the drums, the acrobats that whirled through the air, the monkeys dressed in gay costumes, and yes, of course, naturally, the blind storyteller. When the lunch bell sounded, Shirley raced to the first in line and waited impatiently for the new girl. Today, she did not mind when no one spoke to her. At last, the girl came into view. Shirley rushed to her side. 你好，我叫 Shirley. 我也是从考来的. The girl looked puzzled, then shook her head, giggling. I don't speak Chinese. I come from Chattanooga. Ladders sped up and down the line. Shirley slunk back to her classroom. She wasn't hungry anymore. The Klansmen were right after all. America was foreign. Oh, so foreign. During the spring recess, Shirley had nothing to do, not even homework. Why don't you go out and play? Suggested her mother. I don't feel like it. Would you like a cupcake? I don't feel like it. Well, what do you feel like? Shirley shrugged. At night, when she was supposedly asleep, Shirley again heard Mother whispering about her. This time Father said nothing about engines. He merely listened. Occasionally, he sighed. On Tuesday, just as Shirley and her mother were about to wash the lunch dishes, Father suddenly burst into the apartment. In his hand, a package. On his face, a smile. "What are you doing home so early, my husband?" "I can't stay, but I have something here for Shirley." "For me?" He nodded, handing her the box. Shirley tore it open. Inside was a pair of shiny roller skates. Before she could even give him a hug, he said, "Now, go out and play." Out in the sunlight, the air was balmy, and through skies of palest sapphire sailed clouds of gossamer silk. As she sat on the stoop, putting on her skates, Shirley dreamed of the day when she would be able to race, sashay backwards, and spin on one foot. Then, and only then, would she strap the skates together, sling them over her shoulder, and march off to join the skaters at school. They would not ignore her then. Not when she could do something they could do. Not when she could skate just like an American. Skates on, she stood up. Off to the right slid one foot. Off to the left slid another. She crashed to the sidewalk. What matter a bruise or two? Without hesitation, but only after numerous false starts, she finally succeeded in scrambling back to an upright position. There! Arms a-twirl, she teetered forwards. She tottered back. The wicked skates refused to obey and dumped her on the ground once more. By supper time, Shirley looked like the beggars who waited by the servants' gate for scraps from the clam table. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her knees and elbows were bleeding, and she was no closer to becoming a skater than when she had started. Never mind, she couldn't wait for tomorrow. Mother, however, did not share her enthusiasm. "I had no idea skating was so dangerous. You could have broken a leg, fallen unconscious, and been run over by a car. Give the skates to me, now!" This was the droplet that broke the dam. Tears fell as Shirley handed over the skates. "Are they so important to you?" Mother asked. Shirley nodded. Mother pretended to busy herself with the skates. "Well," she said gently, "perhaps when your bruises are healed and your father's not busy, he can go skating with you. But that would not be the same."